Welcome to the Career Ready podcast. Learn about resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, interviewing, and all the things you need to be career ready with the Career Services Center at College of DuPage. I'm one of your hosts, Rebecca Harrington. Later in today's episode, you'll hear my interview with Danielle Kuglin Seago from Project HireEd at College of DuPage to talk about apprenticeships.
And I'm your co-host, Pierre Michaels. I will start the episode with some information about the Career Ready competency of career and self-development. As we've discussed on this podcast, as identified by NACE, career and self-development is a crucial competency for professionals. NACE, or the National Association of Colleges and Employers, defines career and self-development as proactively develop oneself and one's career through continual personal and professional learning, awareness of one's strengths and weaknesses, navigation of career opportunities, and networking to build relationships within and without one's organization. We have talked about this career competency in the past, but I want to revisit it as there's a lot of different components to it. Today, I'm going to focus on two key behaviors identified by NACE. First, develop and plan goals for one's future career. This development should be an ongoing thing happening at all stages of one career. At an early professional stage, this could be more of career exploration or career research process. From there, the next step may be determining specialties within a field. Then we become established in our career, and then we want to start planning the goals, and goal setting may shift and how we may want to advance in a path. This behavior is essential throughout one's career from that early exploration to career advancement. So now that we're talking about career advancement, that brings me to the second behavior of identify areas of continual growth while pursuing and applying feedback. The first half of this definition relates to continual growth, which to me has two parts to it. The first is the awareness of what we need for a chosen path, but then that second part of the awareness is filling in those gaps to make that growth happen. The second part of this definition of pursuing and applying feedback really helps us work on that awareness. As we go down our professional journey, we want to get feedback from supervisors, colleagues, coworkers, and especially while we're still a student, faculty to help facilitate that growth. So Rebecca, as we discuss these two components, do you have any insight or suggestions of how individuals can get involved? And specifically, I want to pick your brain on emphasizing this idea of opportunities where we can be getting feedback from other people.
Absolutely. I think there's a couple ways to approach this. We can think about it from a student perspective and from an employee standpoint. I think we've talked a lot about it from a student standpoint of, you mentioned getting feedback from your faculty. So that means, really paying attention to the projects that you're doing and making sure that you're getting that feedback. And sometimes I think that means getting help from the instructor while you're working on a particular project or paper instead of waiting till the end and then you just get a final letter grade, kind of as you're doing it. And I think that is helpful. And also involved in that is kind of some self-reflection to really think about, what I'm learning as I go. And then that also means looking at student clubs, organizations, volunteering, doing internships, doing things outside of just your regular education where you're able to explore opportunities, learn about what you want your career path to be. So when you're interviewing for something, we talk about this as a skill that employers are looking for. It's because they want to know that you chose this career and that you have ideas of what your strengths are and where you need to grow. So if you're doing that volunteer work, if you're doing the career exploration piece of it with internships and with having conversations with your faculty and other professionals, then when you go to that interview, you can say, I'm really excited about working here because as part of my volunteering, I learned that I really enjoy working for a smaller company where, it's really easy to get to know everybody and, there's a lot of opportunity, so you kind of have something to talk about that shows that you've really thought about your career and where you want to go. And then the other part of it is once you're on the job, I always suggest make sure you're talking to your supervisor, Let them know, hey, I want to grow. I want to learn new things. Are there any classes I can go to or things I can learn? Your employer might have a department even that their whole job is to offer those kind of opportunities to you. It just depends on the size. Sometimes maybe your supervisor isn't that into it, or maybe they can only do so much. I think it's always good to also find a mentor, someone either at your company or somewhere else that is in your field that can really give you good suggestions about maybe national organizations to join, which you could also do as a student, right? Also shows, kind of that desire to learn more and grow. And, as you said, kind of research different career opportunities. But don't just rest on your laurels, right? Don't rest on where you're at. If you're working in a department and there's, we're going to be bringing in a new piece of software, we're going to be doing this new thing, volunteer, show up, show that you want to grow. And that's really going to help you down the road.
Yeah, right. So being set to take advantage of all those different resources, opportunities, and, you've mentioned, a lot of things within there, the volunteering, the internships. You didn't mention it, but, apprenticeships are a great thing.
We're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so we'll be getting more into that in a moment here. And with all that in mind, I just want to kind of wrap up sharing a little bit of my story, my journey. When I started college, I had no idea where I was going. I was just kind of going to class, trying to figure it out. Then I got exposed to a few different things. And then I got involved. I got feedback on what I'm good at, how I could be applying myself better in work settings, creating that awareness. And then I started doing experiences, internships, getting more feedback. So I kind of had an idea of, I want to go down this path. But then that exposure, that feedback helped me define my path and get me to where I am today. So getting out there, getting involved is a great piece to be developing this career and self-development skill set, seeking out that feedback. And we mentioned this idea of apprenticeships. And this could be a great way to be pursuing different opportunities, creating some of that awareness. But if you're not sure what apprenticeships really are, we've got a great interview here to help you get a better understanding of this option.
Okay, so I am here with Danielle Kuglin Seago from Project HireEd at College of DuPage to talk about apprenticeships. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca.
It's exciting to hear about apprenticeships. We talk a lot about internships on our podcast, but this is something new. And I think a lot of people don't think about it in the United States, which is something that we were just talking about. But let's get started with a more kind of entry-level question then, right? Assuming that we don't know anything about this topic. What is an apprenticeship and how do they typically work?
Sure. Great. Well, excited to be here and to talk about apprenticeship. This is something I feel very passionately about, and I'm excited to tell you more about what that looks like. So apprenticeship is really an earn and learn model where employers get to build their future talent and workforce, and they really identify that talent early on and then provide the training that happens on the job and in the classroom that complements the role itself and really helping to set somebody up for success in that career or occupation that employer is hiring them for. And apprenticeships are a fairly flexible model, so they may have different approaches or ways that they're looking at the work, but there are definitely some common themes that apprenticeships carry. So apprenticeships are typically full-time employment, and the employer will be paying that apprentice for their time, their wages. And then the wages actually increase throughout the duration of the apprenticeship program. So somebody's actually earning more money as they go through the apprenticeship program, as they're gaining competencies and skills on the job. They also get the benefits of being a full-time employee. So that could be related to retirement, sick time off, whatever sort of health or medical benefits that are available to the other employees in the organization. They are considered one of the employees of that company, and so they get access to all of those same perks. The employer covers the cost of the training program. So here at the college, what that looks like is that the employer is paying for the tuition, books, and fees opportunities here at College of DuPage for that apprentice to be able to take coursework that's directly related to the role that they have with that employer. And really, they're looking to gain new skills and to learn competencies. And those competencies are learned in the classroom and on the job. And those competencies relate to that position. And so at the end of that apprenticeship program, we want to see somebody who has completed the coursework. And typically here at COD, that means a certificate or a degree, that they've completed experience on the job. So they've been working in the role and learning. And at the end of it, we can go through the list of competencies and they can confidently say, hey, I've learned and mastered all of these components. And when they've done that, that means they've successfully completed their apprenticeship program.
How exciting. So that sounds like seriously the best of all worlds, where you're getting your education paid for, plus you're working. And I like the idea that you earn more the longer you're in it, kind of an incentive, right, to stay and to keep going.
Correct. Yeah, retention is a big part of apprenticeship programs. So, the benefit to an employer is that they want to have an employee long term. And for that job seeker, they get connected to an organization that really values their people, values training, and wants to see somebody long term in that role. So, that invested success on both parts of the student learner and the employer are really important parts of apprenticeship programs.
Yeah. And so I think that kind of leads to the second question I have there, which is maybe what is kind of a difference then between doing an apprenticeship, versus a traditional education or even just going in with on-the-job training? Because I'm sure there's a lot of companies out there that are like, oh, just come here and we'll teach you the job, right? So, how does an apprenticeship differ from those two things?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we do here at College of DuPage is many of our apprenticeships are actually wrapped around existing academic certificates or degrees here at the college. So they are still getting those same traditional educational opportunities, but they're able to do that with this apprenticeship wrapped around it, which is that integrated learning that they're having when they're on the job. And so they're at their workplace learning about it, getting to practice it, and then they're going to school and they're learning about it and practicing it. And so that integrated learning really helps set students up for success. And so we've been studying and following along to see how is that looking for students completing programs. And so we're seeing higher retention numbers of students completing programs, and how are they doing academically in their coursework. And we've seen that in many cases our apprentices are achieving higher academic standards than their peers who are not in an apprenticeship program because they're getting that integrated learning where they're getting to practice what they're learning in the classroom outside of it. We also know that apprentices don't need to necessarily have the experience when they're coming into the role.
Oh, okay.
And so, they really could be somebody who are really looking for that career opportunity to start their career. And employers are really looking to meet them at the door to say, here, let's build you into the ideal candidate or employee that we want for this role. So it's also about access and opportunity for people who maybe didn't think about that career for themselves before, or maybe they didn't have the funding or the access or the confidence to see themselves as a student at a college. And so now because they're part of the apprenticeship program, they have access or ability or supports to be able to do so and to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I like that, the idea of, maybe it removes a lot of barriers for people that would maybe normally not even think they could join a particular career because they think, well, I can't stop work and go to school, right? Or, I just don't have the education to be able to do that job. And this way you kind of get both.
Absolutely.
Ah.
Yeah, and we see a number of our apprentices that are coming in who are community members or current students who are studying in those fields who say, I want that apprenticeship experience. And so that's one pathway. But incumbent workers or people who are currently out in the workforce working for their employers is another pathway for people to get to apprenticeship. And so oftentimes in that model, we see an employer tapping somebody who works for them. And we have wonderful cases of people who have been with their employer for 20 years and are sending their own children off to college. But the employer tapped them on the shoulder and said, I see your potential. and I want to take you from the role that you're in to the next level. And so we're going to help you get there by putting you through this apprenticeship program. And so those are wonderful successes for us when we can see people who are later in life, who are looking at kind of the next stage of their career and being able to advance. And many times in those cases, it's somebody who hasn't been in the classroom for a long time, or, maybe doesn't have the confidence in themselves to have thought of themselves in that career or that opportunity. But because the employer saw that potential, and because we have good supports to help them, we now see those people advancing in their careers and having success.
That's amazing. I had not thought about, I thought about maybe people changing careers, but I love the idea that an employer can use this as an opportunity, because we all know people, that we've seen that just can't get to a certain level in their career because they weren't able to go to school or they weren't able to finish school. And so what a great opportunity for them. I love it. Now, so we kind of talked about a little bit of this already, but what are some things about the apprenticeships that are valuable for students? You kind of talked about some of the benefits, but maybe just expand on that a little bit. If I'm a student and I'm thinking about, what should I do an internship? Should I just go get a degree, or should I do an apprenticeship? Kind of why would I choose apprenticeship?
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to some of the things that have already been mentioned, like earning wages and not having to pay for your college education because the employer is covering the cost of it, having access to things like benefits and retirement and paid time off, there's other pieces of the apprenticeship program that are really a benefit for students. So one of the things we really stress in our program is providing support to our apprentices. And so we have a specific case manager who's assigned to each apprentice and is really there to help provide support and be a conduit between workforce and education. Mm-hmm. And so, we have a lot of career coaches on our staff who have experience in helping coach people through that transition of how do you go from being a student or somebody who hasn't worked in the field or in a different role to now moving into that role. And so that case manager is there to really help support them, also to make referrals on campus, whether that's to counseling and advising, if they have need access to things like the food pantry or tutoring or access and accommodations, any of those resources that a student might need, we can get them connected to those resources. We're also implementing some new things like a financial literacy program. So for people who haven't earned wages before and now have money, how do you manage that money? How do you handle that? What do you do with it? How do you budget? And how do you make sure that you don't, how do you handle debt and have investing? And what does retirement look like? And so for some people who are starting an apprenticeship, they've never grappled with that before. And so we're putting a training program in place to help them with that. And we do have a first 90 days on the job program as well. That's really just the support that is embedded into the apprenticeship program for somebody who's starting to make sure that they're getting what they need to be successful both in their role as a student and as an employee. In addition to the case management, we try to focus on Department of Labor registered apprenticeship programs. So the benefit of being a DOL or Department of Labor registered apprenticeship program is that the national standards of apprenticeship have been applied to that particular program. And so at a national level, they've said, yes, this role, these competencies, this training program is all approved, and anybody who's going into this role at least meets these standards that are common across anybody who's going through that DOL registered program. So, for example, if you want to be an industrial maintenance mechanic, if you're an industrial maintenance mechanic here in Illinois in DuPage County with the College of DuPage, your program looks similar to the program that might be out in California with a totally different college, community college out there that runs an industrial maintenance program. But there's commonalities. Those competencies would be the same or similar training programs. And so at the end of it, that apprentice gets a certificate from the National Department of Labor saying, you've met all these competencies that we set up and designate as sort of national standards. The benefit to an apprentice is, hey, you've got your job now and the career that you have, but if something comes up and you need to move to California, you have that certificate that you take with you in addition to the one that you got from the college. And that certificate will then say, hey, I've learned these competencies that run across the nation, and they can get access to potentially roles there based on that credentialing that they get through the Department of Labor.
Okay. And I was going to ask, is there like a requirement for how long an apprentice should be staying at the employer after? Because I love the idea of portability, and that's what I was thinking of. A big benefit is that you're ending with an actual degree that you can then take other places. But, is there some sort of requirement for how long you have to stay?
I will say that typically in this case, the employer is going to designate what that duration will be after an apprenticeship program completes. Typically, that's reflective of what they have in place for any sort of tuition reimbursement.
Sure.
And so those tend to follow whatever the employer already has in place. For the duration of the apprenticeship program, we default to what the Department of Labor has provided as a recommendation. Mm-hmm. So there are some programs that might only be 1 year in length. That's 2,000 hours of on-the-job training. That's about a year. But there's other programs that are 3 years in length. And so that requires an apprentice to complete 6,000 hours of on-the-job training. What we do as the apprenticeship program is that we handle all the paperwork, the tracking. We work with the partner to get everything, the employer partner to get everything that's needed to make sure that we can turn everything into the Department of Labor and that both the employer and apprentice can take advantage of those benefits of being in a DOL registered program.
Gotcha. And is it typical for these apprenticeship programs kind of, I don't know, I understand the whole country. To have the support that you have in your department, because I think that's fantastic that you have people to support the students in that way. Is that something, if I'm looking for an apprenticeship program, sounds like something I should be asking about?
Yeah, the model looks different wherever you go, but I think that is important to be looking for things like who's sponsoring the apprenticeship program, what kind of support are they providing to the apprentice in the program. I've certainly encountered apprenticeship programs where it's all about the numbers and getting as many people in the door as possible. And while I think that's really important, our mission, our vision is also that we focus on that retention piece. And we want this to be a career for somebody.
Right.
We want to make sure we're getting the right people in the right seats for the right experience. And so, I think those are all things to be looking for as you're part of that experience and that apprenticeship program. What else is kind of encapsulated into that program? How else are they supporting you as the apprentice in your experience and journey? And it is included in the registered apprenticeship program that there be a mentor assigned to an apprentice as well as the supervisor. So that's also an important part, I think, of that support system that's in place for an apprentice is who would that mentor be and who is that supervisor, and making sure that they're both there on the job providing just as much support as we as the educational institution provide to that apprentice.
Absolutely. And, how we've talked a little bit about the fact that you're getting these specific degrees and you're getting these skills that you can kind of take with you. And so how do apprenticeships help students develop those practical skills and knowledge that are different than just being in the classroom?
Absolutely. There's a lot of skills that apprentices are gaining on the job and in the workplace. I think one of the things that stands out to me is problem-solving skills.
Absolutely.
And so they're getting real-world examples and challenges and situations that they have to face in the workplace, and they have to solve them. But they have that opportunity to integrate what they're learning in the classroom directly with what's happening on the job. And being able to address the responsibilities of their position, and they're doing it in a real world scenario. This is the job, and they have to be able to solve that problem.
Yeah.
We also know that our apprentices are gaining time management skills, communication skills. There's a lot of things that we're helping them with along their journey. So, for example, we have an apprentice who's doing healthcare information technology. So they're working at a healthcare provider, and they're doing IT support in their role. It's actually a 100% remote apprenticeship. And this is somebody who came into the position who maybe needed some confidence in their communication skills and being comfortable in starting their career. And what we've heard from this apprentice is that because of their experience in the program, the support they've received, that they've had a steady increase in their confidence and ability to communicate with senior level managers, and that this person's actually choosing to go in and really kind of hotel space for some face-to-face time with their colleagues because they're finding that networking is so valuable and that's really a benefit for them, and they're gaining so much from that.
Excellent. So if you don't mind, I'm actually going to switch questions around a little bit because it's very interesting that you mentioned the healthcare industry, right? And someone doing remote. So are there some industries where apprenticeships are more common, or is there some that are growing?
Absolutely. So apprenticeships are industry driven. And so it's up to the workforce and the employers who say, I have a need in my talent to be able to fill this open position or open positions. And so I want to make sure that I am building a pipeline of candidates that can fill this position, and I'm never in the position where I don't have somebody to fill it. And that's the beauty of apprenticeship. You've always got somebody on the pathway who's learning the role to be able to fill that position. And that tends to be positions that are in high demand. So healthcare absolutely is a field that we see apprenticeship really taking off in a non-traditional way. We often think about apprenticeship and we think trades or we think manufacturing.
Yep.
And there are absolutely apprenticeships there. And in manufacturing, industrial maintenance, by and large, is a huge need in our region right now, and it continues to be. So I don't think that'll go away. But areas like healthcare, I think, have seen the success of apprenticeship in manufacturing and taken a look over there and said, hey, what are those guys doing? It looks pretty good. It's working. It's helping their workforce. It's creating a talent pipeline. We want to figure out how we do that. And so we are seeing fields like healthcare where even the accrediting body for fields like surgical tech and sterile processing have changed the way that they accredit programs at colleges to make sure that the apprenticeship program can be a part of the way that they offer their program because they see the value of it. And so we're seeing more and more of those changes happening so that it can be more successful. We're seeing other non-traditional fields like education, whether that's students who are looking to work in the elementary or secondary education, but also early childhood education. There's a big gap right now or a huge need in that field. And so there's more and more apprenticeship opportunities that are coming up there.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I think this one is a little different because it's not asking about the student so much as the employer, but I think it's helpful if someone's thinking, is this a good opportunity, is how do the apprenticeships benefit the employers? I think you've touched on it, but let's just dive a little deeper. Why would an employer want to do this?
Yeah. So, the worst thing I think for an employer is to be facing a workforce shortage. And we know baby boomers have been retiring.
Yes.
They're leaving the workforce. With that goes their institutional knowledge that they've been acquiring over their career with that employer. And so there's deficits. And with that deficit, employers aren't able to meet the demands and needs that they have. And that's costing them time. It's costing them money. And so employers are saying, we need to have people who can fill these roles. And industrial maintenance is the example. There aren't enough industrial maintenance mechanics out there in the world for them to fill all the open spots that we have. And so how are we going to solve this problem? We're going to build industrial maintenance mechanics. We're going to use the apprenticeship model to identify people who have that talent, plug them into the program, and then at the end of it, you've got that candidate. You've got somebody with 2 years experience with the training you wanted, everything that you desire in your job posting that you couldn't fill because there's nobody out there to fill it. Now you've built somebody, and they know your way of doing things. They have good habits based on what you have at your workplace. They know your culture. You're invested in them, and they're invested in you. And so, we've really seen that as a key for many of our employers who say this is an important model for us. I think we're also seeing that helping to reduce some of the job hopping and the ghosting.
Oh, sure.
That happens.
I see. I work with internships, and I know for employers that's the ghosting is a big thing. They'll have an intern who maybe will say they're going to stay, they're going to keep going at that employer, but then they don't. So I can see, if you're more committed, you've spent more time working at that employer for years instead of just 3 months. There's a bigger commitment.
Yeah. And this is definitely helping to address that retention issue that employers are seeing. And then there's benefits for employers. So for the example, in the state of Illinois, there's tax credits that are available to employers who participate in an apprenticeship program. There's also grant funding that's out there that helps make apprenticeship more feasible option for somebody who's maybe a small business and can't find the funding to be able to support, for example, maybe the cost of the training program. Well, maybe there's grant funding that we can go out and use with some of the investment that the employer can provide and be able to put together a program for them so that they can still participate in something like this. Bigger employers tend to say yes more easily because they have those types of funds, but because of places like WorkNet DuPage that has incumbent worker training dollars, smaller employers, medium-sized employers can also take advantage of this model for training their future workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone that's listening, if you haven't, we actually talked to WorkNet in our one of our previous episodes. So take a look at that if you want to learn more about them. Now, my last two questions have to do with, so I've decided, right, that I think this is something I want to explore. So what are some typical requirements for applicants to apprenticeships?
So the key to an apprenticeship is that an apprentice is hired directly by the employer. So it's really important to ensure that the candidate is aware of the hiring requirements and are prepared for an interview or submitting their resume. So we appreciate our great colleagues and partners at Career Services because when we do work with students who or community members who don't feel as confident in those areas, we can help refer them to the services that you all provide. So we appreciate you for that. But, other things that might be specific to a particular industry or field, like manufacturing or in healthcare, there might be a drug testing, or they may have to be able to demonstrate knowledge around different things. So in manufacturing, it's very common to be given a ruler and asked to do some basic math with that ruler if that's used for the position.
Interesting.
And then in fields like healthcare, there could be healthcare requirements such as immunizations or background checks. But by and large, candidates for us really just have to be in good standing with the college and then be willing to engage in an apprenticeship program where they're trying to start their career.
There you go. Have an interest, a desire to learn, right?
Yep, exactly.
So what are some tips and resources that students can use to find apprenticeships?
Yeah. So locally, students can always, or community members can always visit the Project HireEd website on the College of DuPage at cod.edu's webpage and look for information about the different programs and occupations that are available. We have an interest form and somebody can fill that out or attend an information session. But outside of DuPage County region, I'd encourage you to reach out to, if you're in the state, Apprenticeship Illinois, which is a website that helps you identify where you could connect to potential apprentice navigators. And that's how in the state of Illinois, we have regional navigators that help connect people to opportunities. And there are also things like pre-apprenticeships. So if you ever see an opportunity to participate in a pre-apprenticeship, I encourage you to do so. It really gives you an opportunity to get a glimpse of what that career path might look like, get to meet some employers, get some training and credentialing, but it's typically short term, so maybe a week or two where you're getting a chance to see what that looks like. I think really, ultimately, it's about making sure you're getting career exposure and taking advantage of some of the opportunities around career research that might be out there to know what path you're interested in and where you want to pursue your apprenticeship program.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question that I didn't include on my list, but I would love to learn a little bit more about you and how you got interested in apprenticeships and bringing this great program to COD.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've had the pleasure of working in a workforce development capacity for about the last 10 years here at College of DuPage. And so I was helping with short-term certificate training programs and getting people connected to different career opportunities in non-credit capacity. And so there was an opportunity and a focus at the college to be really intentional around apprenticeship and about 5 years ago. And that was something that really interested me because I loved the work I was doing, but I love that this really helps students dive into a career, and it's a broad spectrum of opportunities. It really focuses on access and student success. And so those are all things that were really important to me, that I wanted to be able to move into this role and to do that. And I will say it is a big system to understand and navigate workforce development and apprenticeships and who the players are and what the opportunities are. And I've just loved every minute of getting to figure that out. And I feel like we've got a great community of people now here in Illinois at the community colleges here at the state and through Apprenticeship Illinois that are all working together to really advance apprenticeship. So much more than it was even just 5 years ago. So it's been really exciting to be a part of this growth and expansion here in the region and the state, and then knowing nationally that apprenticeship, while it is only a small percentage of the work-based learning that takes place in the U.S., we see the models in other countries where it is a much higher percentage. And, there's a lot of emphasis and support right now at the national level to build apprenticeships out as the future of work-based learning for more and more people to take advantage of. So it's been exciting to be a part of all of it.
Oh, that's great. So if you are out there listening to this and you think this sounds like an interesting way to move into a new career or a career, definitely, check out Project HireEd at College of DuPage or any of the other resources that Danielle just mentioned. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so what did you think, Pierre, of that interview with Danielle? She had so much information. I felt like I could have talked to her for another 2 hours.
Yeah, I really appreciated her coming in, sharing this insight. As you said, apprenticeships isn't something that we talk about that often. It's kind of like a specialty program that's out there. So then when we're just meeting with general job seekers and helping them move forward, it's not that it's not something they could pursue. It's just that we tend to fall into, okay, these are the common things out there, and the conversation doesn't always go towards that. So to hear her insight on apprenticeships, I think is really valuable.
Absolutely. I think that there's so much more to it and so many more industries than I would have thought, and different, I think often we think of apprenticeships as, 18-year-olds and they're starting off their career and this is a great way to get into a career. But to think that it's actually something that can happen kind of at any time is really interesting.
Yeah, I appreciated her talking about the different industries, indicating, manufacturing, those traditional trades, but then healthcare is like that growing area, but then even education and early childhood education, like I know, like just naturally through those programs, education experiences are like a thing.
Right.
But as a full apprenticeship, I didn't think that was a trend, but here we are learning.
There you go. What else did she talk about that you kind of struck out to you?
Yeah, going back to what you were just saying as far as it not just being 18-year-olds. And like it could be someone that has been on the job doing it for a while, and it's like, hey, we want to invest in you. And we're going to have this apprenticeship to help you advance professionally within our organization. So that's a good thing to keep in mind as we're just trying to evaluate career changes and going down career paths. Maybe your current organization could be something to look into. And
you could mention this to them as a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, just going back to the beginning, the simplification of what is apprenticeship. Earn and learn.
Right.
Earn and learn, right? That's what it is. It's pretty self-explanatory. You're earning money and you're learning at the same time. The learning comes from the classroom, but it also comes from that experience. So that, her talking about the integrated learning, a big component of that, those were the simplification of what apprenticeship is, but it really stands out, really communicates the value there.
So one other thing that I noticed that she talked about was all of the skills and competencies that the students learn. And we love talking about competencies on the Career Ready podcast. So what did you notice about all of those things she talked about? Yeah,
right. You asked about what skills, knowledge are they developing? And she named like half the competencies, just, almost basically verbatim as NACE talks about them and as we talk about here on the podcast. So I think we point this out, how often it like naturally just comes up in these different conversations we have. It's not like we are just talking about these because we think they're important, right? They are important. They're coming from research from NACE they're coming from actual perspective of employers and people that work with employers in these programs. So to hear her just again, naturally bring those up only shows the value of why we always throw those nice competencies into our episodes.
Yeah, we didn't. I promise I did not prompt her to say problem solving as number one and communication as number two, because again, we talk about that a lot, but it was great. It's always good to get kind of that feedback. That we're on the right track with it. Any last things that she talked about that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I want to go back to what she was talking about with the Department of Labor Registry.
Yes.
And how that really makes it a universal thing.
Right.
Being able to relocate and have it be not just like, oh, this is a program for DuPage County or wherever it's being operated at. It does let you take that experience and then bring it elsewhere. So it's not just like, oh, I'm doing this apprenticeship and I'm on this one track. It opens it up to many opportunities.
Absolutely, because I think I could see some people being hesitant with an apprenticeship, thinking, well, I'm only really learning the job for this one company, and it'll mean that I can never leave the company or go to, get promoted to a new job or grow. And it really doesn't sound like that at all. I mean, sure, there might be some requirements for a few years that you do need to stay with an employer, which, those that maybe work at a company with tuition reimbursement are used to that. I mean, of course, if they're going to pay for education, they're going to ask that you stay there for a couple of years. But that, it's not, the skills that you're learning are not just for one company. They are, but like you said, because there's this national piece of it, you can have that confidence that it can be taken elsewhere. Well, again, thank you to all of our listeners, and special thanks again to Danielle Kuglin Seago for joining us on the podcast. We hope you have a better understanding about apprenticeships, and be sure to join us for our next episode where we'll be talking about using your network for career research.